Sunday dinners at my parents' house always looked peaceful from the outside, the kind of scene that belongs on a postcard. But inside, tension floated through the air like perfume you couldn't escape. I could already feel it as I set my fork down and smiled through my mother's forced cheer. She said she just wanted her daughters to get along, but she knew that was wishful thinking. Melissa never missed a chance to jab at me, and today, she seemed especially eager. I tried to keep my tone calm, but my pulse was already racing. She tilted her head and smirked. "Miss Perfect with her perfect husband and perfect life," she said. I wanted to roll my eyes, but instead I bit my lip, pretending her words didn't sting. Daniel laughed softly, trying to lighten the mood, but I saw the flicker of discomfort in his eyes. It wasn't just another sibling argument. Something darker was brewing underneath. I felt it, that cold instinct only sisters can sense. My mother looked tired, my father silent, as if both were waiting for the explosion we all knew was coming. And then Melissa's voice shifted. Lower, sharper, almost trembling with something like victory. "You think he's some kind of saint, Lauren?" she said, her eyes locked on mine. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. The room went still, as if everyone had stopped breathing. I stared at her, trying to laugh it off, but the words that followed would burn into me forever. "You think he loves you? He doesn't. He slept with me first." For a second, I thought I'd misheard her. The clinking of silverware faded, the laughter from the kitchen stopped, and all I could hear was the pounding in my chest. My mother's hand flew to her mouth, my father's chair scraped loudly against the floor, and Daniel, my husband, just sat there, frozen, pale, silent. I wanted him to speak, to deny it, to do something. But his silence said everything I didn't want to believe. I felt the room tilt, like the ground itself had betrayed me too. My throat went dry, my fingers trembling against the tablecloth. I looked at him, the man who'd promised me forever, and saw a stranger sitting in his place. Melissa stood tall, defiant, feeding off the chaos she'd created. My family's gasps filled the room, but none of it mattered. All I could think was, how long has everyone been lying to me? I pushed back my chair, the sound echoing like thunder in the small dining room. My mother reached for my hand, whispering my name, but I couldn't look at her. In one sentence, I thought, my sister burned down my entire world. Daniel tried to speak. A soft, broken, Lauren. But I was already standing, already walking away. I didn't know where I was going, only that I needed to leave before the walls closed in completely. I could still hear her voice echoing behind me as I crossed the hallway, shrill, desperate, victorious. Every step away from that table felt like tearing off a layer of skin. I wanted to scream, to throw something, to make her feel what I was feeling. But all I managed was silence. My mother was crying, my father shouting at Melissa, and Daniel's voice trailed after me, small and pathetic. "Lauren, please," he said, but I couldn't bear to hear my name in his mouth. Outside, the cool air hit my face like a slap. I leaned against the porch railing, my hands shaking so hard I had to grip it to stay steady. I stared out at the garden, the same one where Daniel once kissed me under the rain, promising he'd never hurt me. I almost laughed at how naive that sounded now. The scent of jasmine mixed with the metallic taste of betrayal in my throat. Inside, I could hear chaos, but out here, there was only me, the night, and the wreckage of a lie I'd called love. That night, I sat alone in the car for hours, the engine off, headlights dim. I replayed every family dinner, every smirk, every time Melissa had called him charming. How many clues had I ignored just to protect my illusion of happiness? By the time I finally turned the key, something inside me shifted. I didn't know what I'd do yet, but I knew this: nothing in that house, or in that marriage, would ever look the same again. The next few minutes were a blur, voices overlapping, chairs scraping, my mother crying, someone shouting Melissa's name. But all I could hear was a high-pitched ringing, like my own body was trying to drown it all out. Daniel's face was a blur of panic and shame, his lips moving, but the words didn't reach me. Everything I had ever trusted felt distant, hollow. I just stood there, staring at him, my heart refusing to understand what my mind already knew. When I finally spoke, my voice didn't sound like mine. "Tell me she's lying," I whispered, barely audible over the chaos. His eyes flicked up to mine, just long enough for me to see the truth sitting there, cold and familiar. "Lauren, please," he said. "It was years ago. Before us." Before us. As if that made it clean, forgivable, small. My stomach turned. Then I heard Melissa's voice again, slicing through the air like glass. Not just before, during. I blinked, trying to make sense of it. "During what?" I asked, my throat closing around the words. Her smirk was the final twist of the knife. "While you two were dating." The room erupted again, but I was already gone, inside my head, floating somewhere between disbelief and disgust. I pushed away from the table, my chair crashing to the floor. "You both disgust me," I said. And before anyone could stop me, I walked out, leaving every lie behind, or so I thought. I drove home in silence, my hands gripping the wheel until my knuckles turned white. The night felt endless, the streets empty except for the sound of my tires on wet pavement. I didn't even know where I was going. I just needed to move. The house felt different when I walked in. Colder, like it already knew what had happened. I left the lights off and sat on the edge of the bed, still wearing my dress from dinner. I stared at the wall until the edges began to blur. Hours passed. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just kept replaying it all. Her smirk, his silence, my mother's horrified face. I tried to convince myself it wasn't real, that maybe I'd imagined it. But betrayal has a way of staining everything it touches. The clock ticked louder, mocking me with every passing second. I could almost hear Melissa's voice echoing in the back of my head, cruel and triumphant. He slept with me first. When the knock came on the bedroom door, I didn't even flinch. I knew it would be him. Daniel's voice was low, trembling, the way a guilty man sounds when the truth is no longer a choice. "Please, just listen," he said. "I made a mistake, but it meant nothing." I wanted to laugh, but my body felt too heavy to move. I turned toward the door and said the only thing that made sense. "You made a choice, and now I'll make mine." After that night, I didn't sleep. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the clock whisper through the dark. Every tick reminded me that life was still moving, even if mine had stopped. By morning, Daniel was gone, maybe to work, maybe to hide. The empty side of the bed smelled like him, and that was somehow worse than if it had smelled like nothing. I wanted to scream, but instead, I made coffee, because that's what people do when their world collapses. They pretend it hasn't. The messages started pouring in before noon. My mother begging me to talk, my father furious, Melissa pretending she was sorry if it hurt me. I deleted them all. I wasn't ready to play the victim in their little family drama. Every time my phone buzzed, I felt the same cold rush of humiliation. My home, my sanctuary, now felt contaminated. Every photo on the wall mocked me. Every memory looked different under the harsh light of truth. By the third day, the silence turned from suffocating to powerful. It was like standing in the wreckage and realizing I was still breathing. I looked around at everything we'd built together, the wedding photos, the shared accounts, the plans for next summer, and it hit me. He'd taken so much, but not everything. Somewhere inside the ashes, something sharper was forming. I wasn't sure yet what I'd do, but I knew this. I wasn't going to cry forever. The days that followed felt strangely quiet, like the world was holding its breath, waiting to see what I'd do. I didn't answer calls, didn't check social media, didn't even open the curtains. I just sat in that half-lit room, trying to understand how two people I'd trusted most could twist my life into a lie. At first, I thought silence would heal me, but silence doesn't fix betrayal. It just gives it more room to echo. Eventually, the tears stopped coming. Something colder replaced them: clarity. I started going through old photos, text messages, anything that could make sense of what had really been happening. Every date night he'd missed, every mysterious errand, every unexplained weekend away. They all connected like puzzle pieces I'd ignored. The truth was uglier than I'd imagined, but it was also strangely empowering. Pain has a way of sharpening your focus, and I could finally see the cracks that had been there all along. For the first time, I wasn't afraid to look. And then came the moment I didn't expect. Buried in old email receipts, I found something else. Transfers. Money wired from our joint account into a name I knew too well. Melissa. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just about lust or betrayal anymore. This was about deceit that stretched years deep. And as I stared at those numbers, a strange calm washed over me. If they wanted to play dirty, they'd forgotten who taught them grace. When I showed the bank statements to Carla, she almost dropped her coffee. "You're not seriously planning to expose them, are you?" she asked, her voice a mix of shock and admiration. I smiled, but it wasn't the kind of smile I used to wear. It was smaller, steadier, the kind that comes from knowing exactly how much you've been underestimated. "I'm done protecting people who stabbed me in the back," I said. "They wanted attention? They'll get it, just not the kind they were hoping for." Carla leaned forward, whispering like we were conspiring in a crime movie. "But Lauren, your family, your parents, this will destroy them." Her words hit hard, but not enough to stop me. "They already destroyed us," I said. "I just refused to see it." It wasn't revenge that fueled me anymore. It was justice, the kind that doesn't come from shouting but from showing. I wanted them to feel what I'd felt. Exposed, stripped of control, cornered by their own lies. That night I went through everything again. Every file, every screenshot, every trace of their deceit. My hands didn't shake this time. There was something sacred about preparation, like I was rebuilding myself piece by piece through the very proof of their betrayal. The more I uncovered, the stronger I felt. By midnight, I had a folder that could burn 2 lives to the ground. And for the first time since that dinner, I slept soundly. By morning, my mind was sharper than it had been in weeks. There's a strange peace that comes after devastation. Once you've lost everything, fear has nowhere left to live. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open, scrolling through messages and photos like I was piecing together a crime scene. Except this time, I wasn't the victim. I was the investigator, the judge, and soon, the executioner. Every truth I uncovered felt like taking back something they'd stolen. I drafted the invitation that afternoon. Just a simple message to the family group chat, "Dinner next Sunday. I think it's time we talk and heal." Even writing it made my lips curl into a bitter smile. Melissa responded with a heart emoji, as if she hadn't ripped my life apart in front of everyone. Daniel replied a few minutes later, relieved, hopeful even. I could almost hear the sigh in his text. "I'm glad you're ready to move forward." Oh, I was. Just not in the direction he thought. As I hit send, I felt a strange thrill, like standing on a cliff and knowing you're about to jump. Not to fall, but to fly. I didn't know what the outcome would be, but I knew I needed them all there, in the same room, under the same roof where my humiliation had begun. I wasn't planning to shout or throw things this time. I wanted quiet truth, the kind that doesn't need volume to destroy. When Sunday came, I woke up calm, unnervingly calm. It wasn't forgiveness that steadied me, it was purpose. The house was spotless, candles lit, the same table set just as before. If anyone walked in, they'd think it was a celebration. In a way, it was. A ceremony for truth. I dressed carefully, nothing too dramatic, just elegance with a touch of distance. The kind of look that says, "I've moved on," even when you're standing right in the ruins. Daniel arrived early, flowers in hand, guilt still etched across his face. He kissed my cheek hesitantly, as if testing whether I'd flinch. I didn't. Melissa came last, wearing perfume that smelled too expensive for her paycheck, and a smile that could curdle milk. She hugged me, that fake, sisterly hug that feels like poison through silk. I almost laughed at the performance. The audacity was impressive. My parents sat between them, nervous, whispering to each other like they already sensed a storm coming. As we sat down, I raised my glass, smiling as if this were just another family dinner. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened," I said, my voice soft but steady. "And I realized something. Maybe honesty is what this family's been missing." My father shifted in his seat. My mother's hand trembled on her napkin. Daniel glanced at me, uncertain. Melissa rolled her eyes. I smiled wider. The stage was set, and they didn't even know the curtain had already risen. I let the silence hang for a moment, just long enough to make them uncomfortable. Melissa shifted in her seat, stabbing at her food though she hadn't taken a single bite. Daniel tried to start small talk, Some awkward comment about the wine, but his voice trembled on the last word. I watched him, his familiar gestures, the way he still used charm as armor. It used to work on me. Not anymore. There's a special kind of strength in pretending you're still fooled, right before you show your hand. So, I said lightly, I thought we could all clear the air tonight. My mother smiled weakly, relief flickering in her eyes. That's wonderful, sweetheart, she said. My father, always the diplomat, nodded. Maybe we can finally put things behind us. I turned to Melissa. Oh, I agree, I said, my tone sweet as honey. That's exactly what I intend to do. She smirked, crossing her arms. She thought she'd already won, that I was here to apologize, to make peace. Poor thing, she never saw the match in my hand. When the moment felt right, I reached for my phone. Actually, I said, I think honesty works best when everyone can see it. I tapped the screen, and the TV behind me flickered to life. The room darkened slightly, faces washed in pale blue light. One by one, the images appeared. Bank transfers, messages, hotel receipts. My heart didn't race. It slowed, steady as justice. The only sound was my sister's gasp, followed by Daniel's soft, broken whisper. Lauren, what have you done? Melissa shot up from her chair, her voice cracking through the air. You had no right to dig through my accounts. Her outrage sounded almost comical, like a thief offended by being caught. I met her eyes and smiled, not out of cruelty, but closure. Oh, but you did, didn't you? I said softly. You had every right to betray me in my parents' home, to humiliate me in front of everyone. I'm just returning the favor, except I brought receipts. My father's jaw tightened. My mother looked like she wanted to disappear. Daniel reached across the table, his eyes pleading. Lauren, please, this isn't you. His voice broke halfway through, the performance slipping. You wanted to play in secret, I said, my tone flat, almost detached. I prefer to end things in daylight. I slid the ring off my finger and set it on the table. A tiny sound, but it echoed louder than any scream. He stared at it, as if that circle of gold could still save him. It couldn't. It never could. The silence that followed was perfect. Melissa's mascara streaked down her cheeks. Daniel's hands covered his face. My parents sat frozen, watching their family unravel piece by piece. I stood, straightened my shoulders, and smiled, not from joy, but from release. Dinner's over, I said. Enjoy what's left. And as I walked out the door, the night air felt lighter than it had in years. Behind me, I could hear the faint sound of my mother crying, and the world I'd outgrown collapsing under its own lies. The morning after felt unreal, too quiet, too clean. My phone buzzed nonstop on the nightstand. Daniel, my parents, even cousins I hadn't heard from in years. Everyone suddenly had something to say, as if their words could undo what had already been done. I didn't answer any of them, not one. I just sat by the window, watching the sunlight crawl across the floor, thinking how strange it was that the world still looked the same when mine had changed completely. I wasn't angry anymore. That part of me had burned away with last night's fire. What was left was lighter, tired, yes, but free. I made coffee, opened the windows, and let the ocean breeze sweep through the house. The salt in the air felt like cleansing. Daniel had always hated living near the coast. Too humid, too unstable, he'd said. Maybe that's why I suddenly loved it. Everything he disapproved of now felt like a small act of rebellion I owed to myself. By noon, I had blocked every number that mattered to my past. It wasn't an impulsive decision. It was an act of survival. My parents would have to choose between pretending nothing happened or finally facing the truth. Either way, it wasn't my burden anymore. I opened my laptop and listed the house for sale, fingers steady, heart quiet. It didn't feel like losing something. It felt like shedding dead skin. It took weeks to finalize the sale, but I didn't rush it. Every signature, every document felt like a ceremony, a goodbye I could control this time. When I finally packed the last box, I found one of Daniel's shirts buried under a pile of linens. For a moment, I just stared at it. Then I tossed it in the trash without a second thought. There was no bitterness left, just an exhausted kind of peace, the kind that comes when you stop expecting apologies from people who were never sorry. My new apartment was smaller, facing the ocean. The first night there, I left the curtains open and listened to the waves until I fell asleep. The air smelled like salt and renewal, and for the first time in years, I didn't dream about anyone but me. I started therapy a week later. My therapist, a calm woman with kind eyes, asked me what I felt. I told her the truth. Relief. Because for the first time, they're the ones living with the shame, not me. She smiled, and I realized I'd just spoken my freedom out loud. Days became lighter. I learned to cook for one, to laugh at quiet movies, to enjoy mornings without checking my phone. Sometimes, I'd think about Melissa, not with rage, but with distance, like recalling a story that no longer belongs to you. I imagined her looking over her shoulder, waiting for the next truth to catch up with her. Daniel, too. Maybe that was my revenge, not destruction, but indifference, letting them live in the ruins they built. One morning, I stood on my balcony, watching the tide pull the foam back into the sea. The horizon stretched wide and endless, and for the first time, I didn't feel small beneath it. I thought about all the years I'd spent trying to keep everything together. The image, the marriage, the family dinners where silence was the only thing served warm. It was exhausting, pretending that love meant loyalty. Now I knew better. Love without honesty is just performance, and I was done performing. People whispered, of course. They always do when a woman walks away from the wreck and doesn't look back. Some called me cold, others brave. The truth? I was both. Healing isn't pretty. It's rebuilding yourself out of ashes, one quiet decision at a time. My therapist once said closure isn't an event. It's a choice you keep making. I didn't need forgiveness, not from them, not even from myself. I just needed peace, and I'd finally earned it. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine, turned off my phone, and stood barefoot by the window. The ocean roared like applause in the distance. It hit me then. This was what freedom felt like. Calm, unremarkable, utterly mine. The world they built on lies had collapsed, but I was still standing. I wasn't the woman who'd walked into that family dinner weeks ago. I was someone new, someone who knew that sometimes the most powerful revenge is simply living well. Months later, I found myself back at my parents' house. The same yard, the same lights strung between the trees, but the air felt different this time. It wasn't heavy anymore. They were renewing their vows after 50 years of marriage, and as I stood among the guests, champagne in hand, I realized how far I'd come. Melissa wasn't there. She wasn't welcome, and no one mentioned her name. Daniel had moved away, probably still rewriting the story to make himself the victim. I didn't care. His version no longer mattered. My father approached me quietly, his suit slightly wrinkled, eyes softer than I'd ever seen them. "You handled it better than I ever could have," he said. I smiled, not out of pride, but understanding. "I didn't handle it," I told him. "I ended it." He nodded as if he finally understood what that meant, that sometimes peace isn't born from reconciliation, but from release. We clinked glasses gently, the sound small but satisfying, like punctuation on a sentence that had taken years to finish. As the night went on, laughter floated through the air, and for the first time in forever, I joined in without forcing it. Someone asked if I'd ever forgive them, Melissa, Daniel, everyone who'd broken me open. I took a slow sip of champagne, feeling the cool bubbles against my lips. "Forgiveness is for the innocent," I said quietly. And none of them were. The music swelled, lights flickered, and I lifted my glass once more, not for them, but for me. For surviving, for choosing truth, for walking out of the fire and still shining.